very special guest, Ambassador James Rosapepe. The title of tonight's event is Romania, Ambassador James Rosapepe, Romania, close and personal. Of course, we will be talking a lot about Romania, but other topics as well. We are very, very honored to start 2020 with such a distinguished guest. This event has been quite a while in preparation, and we're very, very happy to finally be able to have it here at the Institute. But it's also special because we are launching an important partnership, and the ambassador will probably talk more about this. And so I won't reveal it, but it's an important cooperation that involves Romanian Cultural Institute and Alianza. Of course, as probably some of you may know, this year we celebrate 140 years since the establishment of diplomatic relationships between Romania and the United States. And this event is also placed under the aegis of this program of celebrations that will go throughout the year here in New York, in Washington D.C., in other places. And we thought it wouldn't be a better way to start this celebration, this 100 years program of events, but in the company of one of the most popular U.S. ambassadors to Romania. Of course, there are many ways to introduce Ambassador James Rosapepe, but I would like to do it in my way, I should say, because I've read this book that is on display. It can be purchased, and of course it will be signed by our guest. I read it with extraordinary interest, and frankly, I've learned a lot about this amazing personality. So one way to describe it is that is one of the probably most charismatic individuals I've ever met. It's really somebody that can command the attention, the excitement of large crowds, not only because he's a politician, which of course he is, but also because it's a very warm and welcoming personality. Another way to describe Jim Rosapepe would be that he was a very successful U.S. ambassador to Romania, one of the most beloved U.S. ambassador, commanding a lot of followers, creating a lot of excitement, and also knowing a lot about our country. And also, I would also describe James Rosapepe as one of the most powerful, most engaged American personalities in what I would call the promotion of Romanian culture interest in the United States. He has done it for many years, and probably he has done it more successful than most other people. He is very much engaged, and we will be talking about your engagement, Ambassador, in Romanian affairs, in strengthening the transatlantic partnership, all these topics of tonight's conversation. So I'm really very proud to welcome Ambassador James Rosapepe tonight at the Romanian Cultural Institute, and I will invite you, Ambassador, to open the conversation with a keynote speech, with some remarks, and then we'll have this dialogue. And at the end, I will open the floor so that we really have a bigger conversation about Romania, about U.S.-Romanian relationship, about anything you wanna talk about. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you for coming out this evening. It's really very humbling, and I'm very appreciative of your interest in joining us tonight. I want to first thank the Romanian Cultural Institute and its leader, Dorian, for inviting me, thinking of this occasion, and the vision to put together this program. Is going to go on this year about the 140th anniversary of the history of Romanian-American diplomatic relations. Now, I want to make the point that I'm not here because I can tell you how it started. I came in later in the process. But I also want to say that that introduction was very, very kind. It was very, very kind, very kind. And I have to say, it may be the nicest, best introduction I've ever gotten. But it is not the nicest introduction that my wife and my co-author of my book, Sheila Cass, got. And this is in 1999, I'm pretty sure. We were doing a tour around southeastern Romania, and we met with the Chamber of Commerce in Brăila. And the president of the Chamber of Commerce in Brăila was a very energetic and very smart man who didn't have enough confidence in English to want to welcome us in English, and so he had an interpreter, which made perfect sense to me. I couldn't do it the other way. I have interpreters. And so he opens up by saying, in Romanian, his interpreter says, "We're so pleased to have with us today Mr. Ambassador," and then he says something else, and then the interpreter is looking for exactly the right word in English to translate how he introduced my wife. And the words came out, "and Her Highness." and I did what you did, and my wife said, "Don't laugh." so this introduction was on the same scale.
I can compete with that.
Exactly. So that was quite an experience. My involvement with the Cultural Institute does go back to when I was ambassador, because as some of you may remember, in 1999, Romania was featured at the Smithsonian Folklife Festival in Washington, D.C., and it was the Cultural Institute Cultural Foundation that was our partner with the Smithsonian in putting that together. And it was a fabulous occasion, and the Institute just did a terrific job of putting together such an array of everything, of performers, of artists, of artifacts. The best, however, which is historic, it is the absolute truth, is they had the idea of bringing a Marmorish church to the mall in Washington. And we had a little negotiation over it because there had never been a church on the mall in the history of the United States until Romania has participated in the Folklife Festival, and they brought the Marmorish Church. And so many of you see the pictures of it, some of you may have been there. It was quite a historic moment. It was really a great partnership. So I'm glad to be back in partnership with the Romanian Cultural Institute. We're going to talk a little more later about some ongoing projects between Alianța, the American organization that I chair the board of now, with the Cultural Institute to work together in the United States over the coming years. I was in Romania in July of last year and had a chance to visit Cluj and Târgu Mureș, where I hadn't been in probably 10 or 15 years, and Bucharest, where I get to Bucharest at least once a year when I'm in Europe for other reasons, come to see friends and catch up on things. But one of the things that impressed me very much, sort of comparing from when I was there the last time to literally Târgu Mureș. I hadn't been to Târgu Mureș in 20 years. I'd been to Cluj probably 10 years ago. Was sort of what had changed and what hadn't changed. And everyone here, obviously, is interested in Romania, knows a lot about Romania. But when you only visit it like once a year, or when you get outside of Bucharest, like every 10 years or so, the economic progress is just amazing. Now, there are tremendous disparities in the country, obviously, between different regions, and Bucharest is booming, and there are areas of Moldavia and other places that are having severe economic problems. But as you know, the last year for which we have numbers, which is 2018, Romania had the fastest growing economy in Europe. One of the things I learned when I was there in July is the estimates are that now the share of gross national product in Romania that comes from IT exceeds the share from agriculture. That's a big deal. And of course, European integration, which is often talked about like a political project, but every place else I went in Europe during this trip, Italy, the UK, Sicily, other places, I ran into Romanians. And in Romania, I would try to get together with people and say, oh, they're vacationing in Spain. Oh, they're in business in Munich. For an American, the degree of integration of real people in real life from Romania with the rest of Europe is a big deal and a big change as well. What hasn't changed, and Romania just experienced this, was the democratic process. When I was there, it was right after the first transition of power from Ion Iliescu to Emil Constantinescu, from one political side to the other political side. Next election goes back the other way. This last election in Romania, very contested, hotly contested, like in the United States, fair election, results, winner, loser, move on. That's the same as it was when I was there. Similarly with ethnic relations, is one of my strong impressions when I was in Romania, it's my strong impression today, is at a time in the world where ethnic tensions are very high. I mean, in Germany, in France, in the United States, Romania remains a real model of how a country with different ethnic groups people can hold on to their heritage, they can hold on to their culture, they can get irritated with each other from time to time, they can disagree about things, but do it in a way that really keeps the society together. So the final thing that has not changed since I was there as ambassador 20 years ago is a strong connection between Romania and the United States. People, in fact, the other day, the deputy ambassador for Israel, I had a meeting with him in Annapolis, and he'd never been to Romania. And he said, well, what was it like being ambassador to Romania? I said, well, it was really, really easy. First of all, Romanians really like Americans, and I'm American. That was one thing. Secondly, I was the ambassador under President Bill Clinton. And people in lots of places in the world, including Romania, really liked Bill Clinton. And I was born in Italy. And so they thought I would speak Italian, which I didn't. But if you're the Italian-American ambassador for the United States under Bill Clinton in Romania, it's a really, really easy job. I enjoyed it immensely. So look forward to all your questions and getting to know you better. Thanks very, very much.
If you want to take these.
Yeah, please.
I think it's better this way. Because you mentioned all these things that remain the same. Let me start by reading a small fragment from your book,
sure.
And then we take it from there. It also, I mean, this book is really full of fantastic fragments about Romania that show not only a very deep understanding about the country, the history, the culture, but also an appreciation of what's happening today. It's really, I should say, very flattering for a Romanian to read things like this coming from a well-known US ambassador. So the fragment reads, in fact, 20 years after the fall of the Berlin Wall, Romania is a vigorously democratic country with well-educated young people, remarkable foreign language skills, a rapidly modernizing economy, a fascinating history that bridges East and West, hospitality that borders on the manic, strong religious faith, and ethnic relations that are a model for more troubled regions. And Romanians love Americans. So, Ambassador, how did it all come along? I mean, how did it all happen? The ambassadorship.
How did I become ambassador?
That's right. Yeah.
I was lucky. I mean, that's the truthful answer. No, it's totally the truth. My wife Sheila and I, who at that time was with ABC Television News, both of us in the early 90s got very interested in the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe and in the former Soviet Union. And Sheila had some tours of duty actually in Russia. Sheila was the White House correspondent, not the White House correspondent, she was the ABC correspondent in Moscow the day of the coup against Gorbachev in 1991. And so she and I had been paying attention to what was going on just because of our personal interest in this. And I got involved in a number of activities from the United States with strengthening relations with the transition. So I was the first chair of Maryland's Sister State Committee with the Leningrad Oblast in Russia. I served on the board of a nonprofit that did exchanges of young politicians from east to west. And then in the first term of President Clinton's term, he asked me to serve on the board of the Albanian American Enterprise Fund, similar to the Romanian American Enterprise Fund that some of you may be familiar with. And so after the 1996 election, President Clinton was reelected, and I had known him over the years. And so the White House asked me if I was interested in being considered for a position in the second Clinton term. And I said, no, I love serving on the board of the Enterprise Fund, but if you want to do something else, I would be very interested in being an ambassador.
In Eastern Europe.
In Eastern Europe, or the former Soviet Union. I want to be clear about that, just for the record. And I figured I'd probably, if I was lucky, I'd get to Kyrgyzstan. Months pass, and they asked me to come in and meet with the person who was handling it in the White House, and I sit down like this, and she says, the president would like you to be ambassador to Romania. I was like, did I miss the beginning of this conversation? And what happened was, I think that I had some background in the region, if not in Romania. I'd never been to Romania before, but obviously had an interest in the transition and the challenges and the opportunities that countries in the region had. And I was lucky.
But what do you think that President Clinton chose to send a non-career ambassador to Romania?
Well, I mean, the history actually is, this does go to the history of Romanian American relations, is most of the ambassadorships for the United States are career diplomats, as are almost all the diplomats from other countries in the world. We have many more non-career diplomats than other countries do. When I was ambassador, this was before Romania got into NATO, we had a monthly meeting of the ambassadors for the NATO countries. And the only one of my colleagues who was not a career diplomat was the ambassador from Portugal. And he had been, very interesting man, very interesting story. He had been basically a student activist against the Salazar dictatorship in Romania and in Portugal, and had been in France, and then came back after their revolution, got active in politics, rose to become the education minister. And by the time I'm in Romania, he's a non-career ambassador. So we kind of compared notes on the non-career piece of it. So it was interesting. But about 2/3 of American ambassadors around the world are career diplomats, about 1/3 are not. And in most cases, a country always has a career ambassador, always has a non-career. But Romania historically has actually kind of gone back and forth. So President Reagan's first ambassador was David Funderburg, who had been a Fulbright scholar, very expert on Romanian. And then his successor was Roger Kirk, who was career, and then John Davis, who was career. And then my predecessor was Alfred Moses, who was non-career, who's very experienced lawyer, been very active in Romania for a long time. And then my successor was Michael Guest, who was career. So it goes back and forth. And so right now, the current ambassador, Adrian Zuckerman, is non-career, but his predecessor, Hans Kleb, was career. So I would say Romania is lucky to have the best of both.
In your preparation, what were the, because you hadn't visited the country,
Yeah.
you know, you were probably just learning about it.
Absolutely.
How did you learn about this, about the country? What were the books you read, the people you met? How did you form this image? Now, I mean, reading this book, it's very probably, I mean, it's like a short introduction, the best introduction in Romania.
That's very good.
But probably at the time, you
No,
still,
I read a whole variety of books. There were books that were recommended to me by the State Department. There were books that were recommended to me by one person in particular, who some people here may know, Vlad Tismananu, very distinguished political science,
Maryland.
University of Maryland, I'm from Maryland, and I read several of his books, and he also recommended other books to read. And then I just met with a whole variety of people. One of the interesting aspects of preparation for all ambassadors in the United States is they offer you the opportunity to meet with the country expert at all these different government agencies. And so I must have met with 50 people from different agencies who, they were sort of the Romania desk for the energy department or the agriculture department, and I always say the two most helpful briefings that I got were from the Peace Corps and the National Security Agency.
Quite a distance, right?
Exactly, but they were by far the most helpful in terms of, one of the things I remember, actually he was the Peace Corps director who was back in the United States, who was running our Peace Corps program there in Romania at that time when I went over. I was asking questions about it, and he was talking about how he felt the Romanians liked Americans better than they liked some other Europeans. And I said, well, why is that? He had a great answer. He said, well, because Americans don't know any European history. They don't know why everybody's mad at each other.
And then you were appointed ambassador. You took the flight to a place called Bucharest,
Yes.
right? And let's see where you landed, right? Bucharest can be as magical as a visitor's lets it be. Its narrow streets and broad avenues cover many centuries of history. On some can be found a residue of beauty, on others a backlog of human misery. It's all there. You can focus on what grabs your heart and mind. Tell us about your first months in Romania and in this city that you ended up knowing so well.
Well, one is literally driving in from the airport, because I never had been to Romania before. I was surprised, despite what I'd read, despite pictures I'd seen, I was surprised at how developed it was. I mean, sort of things.
You didn't expect that.
I didn't somehow, because what got a lot of attention was either the economic deprivation in the 1980s, under the last year of the Ceausescu regime, and from just a visual point of view, just the sort of a communist block architecture of the blocks. And so I sort of had that vision, and when I knew that about the Paris of the East, and I had read all about Between the Wars and Athenay Palace and that, but I thought of that was kind of like a little piece of the puzzle. But when you come into Bucharest for the first time, and it's like
quite a lot.
It's quite a lot, exactly. That was one visual impression. It was like, wow, this is a much bigger deal from a city point of view than I had quite understood. On a more social note, this is the God's honest truth, is in the first couple of months I was there, I would have Romanians complain to me about how Romania wasn't a democratic country. We're talking about in 1998, after you'd had the election of '96, where Pesede and Iliescu had lost the election and turned over the government to the Democratic Convention and to Constantinescu. You had the normal democratic transition to power. Oh, we don't have a real democracy here. I was like, well, why not? What's wrong with your democracy? And I'm not making this up. It sounds like I am, but I'm not making it up. People would say, well, first of all, the members of parliament are arguing with each other all the time. Okay, what else? The press writes whatever it wants, whether it's true or not. Okay? And the politicians, they're only worried about the next election. So, you see, we're never going to be a real democracy. I said, I'm sorry, I'm just the ambassador of the United States. I'm just saying this is as good as it gets. Is the fact that the members of parliament are arguing with each other is because they can. And that's kind of what it's there for. And the fact that the press writes what it wants instead of what somebody else tells them to write, that's a good thing. And the fact that the politicians are worried about the next election is because there is a next election. So, things are going good.
So what were the challenges in your when you started? Because after that, all changed. But we'll talk about that in the first months. The political landscape, was it too complicated? The culture, was it too remote? Or
No.
Nothing of the sort.
No, really, it was almost the reverse. I mean, I'm not sure what the proper formulation is, but picking shit, maybe something like that. I was very happy. I was enjoying myself enormously. No, seriously, because I was meeting all these very interesting people and learning about a culture that was not mine, and learning about a political culture that was different than mine. So it was. I say it's being in a situation like this, and I think this is true for any diplomat serving another country. It's like you're going to graduate school, but you're getting paid for it. You get to learn all this stuff, you get to meet with all these interesting people, you get to read all these things. So it was fascinating, and it did not get less fascinating at the end of 3 years, which is why I keep going back.
But you immediately started to get out of the corridors of power, of the meeting rooms, get into the streets, meeting people, talking to people. It was probably amazing for many people that the U.S. ambassador was, just appearing somewhere, and talking to people. You used to drive by yourself, your car through Bucharest and in the surroundings. Tell us a little bit about this experience of meeting the real Romania, the real people, the normal people outside.
No, I understand. Well, one of the experience was that I'm not very good at learning languages, but I tried to learn some Romanian, and I realized pretty quickly that most people in Romania would hear me on television or radio. And so if I practiced a few short phrases and practice pronunciation, that's why my wife is a broadcast journalist. That's what radio and television would use. They would use the Romanian. They don't care. They don't want to do the translation. So I had some phrases. So I hadn't expected it exactly this way. But what happened was, so almost every time I did a planned radio television interview, I'd have like a phrase or two in Romanian, and they'd use that. So literally, as I started traveling around the country and visiting cities and so forth, people would come up to me and just start chattering in Romanian. And I said, no, I don't speak Romanian. I just play that on TV. And people were ready. I said, oh, okay. So I didn't mean to mislead people. But as I've said, I mean, people are just so warm, so open. And the language thing is a big deal, actually, from an American point of view, is because Americans are not very good with language. The old stories of, what do you call someone with two languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone with one language? American. And so it was stunning to me all around the country to meet so many people in so many different situations who spoke English. I mean, you do not find that in Italy. Now, people here, you surely don't find it in France. And so it's quite amazing the language skills. Although my wife had a line about that. She said because people were talking to her in English, and often would apologize and say, "I'm so sorry, my English isn't as good as I would like it to be. It's not nearly as good as my German." My wife said, "I do not want to hear how good your German is."
And you traveled a lot. You met a lot of people, you know, and you have become instantly very, very popular. You are on TV, on radio, but in the middle of people all the time, traveling, going outside Bucharest, going
absolutely.
everywhere in the country. This book reads like a travelogue, you know, with all these.
You got it. That was the intent.
and everywhere you talk to people, you meet, and you've become quite not quite, but immensely popular. Even today, people remember you, and you know so well. How did you handle this popularity?
It sort of goes back to what I said at the beginning. If you're the American ambassador of Italian descent under Bill Clinton, people are very nice to you. So I felt very lucky and honored, frankly.
It just happened, you know. It wasn't engineered, right?
Well, here's what I would say: is I think that what was engineered was I intended to get out around the country a lot, and I intended to be visible. Because I think and different ambassadors have different roles and different skill sets. So some of my predecessors and successors have had skill sets that I didn't have, and so everyone's plays to their strengths. But I felt that I've been given the opportunity and responsibility to not simply be a government-to-government ambassador, but clearly to be, as the Cultural Institute is for Romania and the United States, a people-to-people connector, because at the end of the day, particularly in democratic societies, but I would argue even in totalitarian and authoritarian societies, at the end of the day, it's the relationships and attitudes of the people towards each other that outlive the political leaders. And so I just thought it was important for me to understand what was going on. And I learned a lot by going out to union halls and going out to schools and going out to farms and going out to small villages. You just learn a lot.
And you enjoyed it.
Well, I definitely enjoyed it. But I mean,
you can tell from some of the pictures that you enjoyed it immensely. And I liked you because you have met all politicians, all presidents, of course, prime ministers at the time, also major religious leaders, captains of industry, and so on. And especially, some politicians that are well known and have remained not only relevant but very, very important in our country. Like this one, ambassador visits a well-known city in central Romania, in Transylvania, where he finds that the mayor of this city, Iohannis, is a tall, cheerful, English-speaking man with a strong resemblance to Arnold Schwarzenegger. His wife, Carmen, is a German-speaking Romanian who teaches high school English after serving as a superintendent of schools for Sibiu, and it's a very, very interesting portrait of our president, and also a very beautiful picture of two Santa Clauses, right? The U.S. ambassador and the mayor of Sibiu. And you can see it there, dressed as Santa Claus in center of Sibiu.
Absolutely.
So, as you mentioned in your book, these 3 years were very, very intense, and also you've learned a lot. Was it a life-changing experience for you? And if it was, in what way?
It was. I mean, it was the most interesting opportunity I've had in my life, for sure. I think the biggest change in my outlook was understanding, in a way that I never had understood before, the impact of the United States, other places, is I realized that because we're a superpower, because we're a big cultural force, because all the things that we all know about the United States, the relationship between the United States and most other countries, maybe all other countries, is not an equal one. And so, as someone said to me when I was in Romania, which is totally true, is Romanians know so much more about the United States than the Americans know about Romania. So from a knowledge point of view, it's an unequal relationship. And actually, we're at the disadvantage because other people know so much more about us than we know about them. And that actually was the biggest, mind-bending conclusion I came to from it. And so, on the one hand, Americans, I think, tend to believe we can be a force for good in the world, and sometimes go overboard and sometimes make mistakes doing that. I think we underestimate the extent to which we can be a negative force by mistake, because we're so big and don't quite notice what we're doing in other places. And I think we see those situations around the world more often than we would like. But I think that's actually the major thing that changed my outlook of where America fits into the world.
What do you think your tenure as an ambassador changed in our country? What was your major achievement? Well, there were probably several.
What I would say is the 3 years I was there, inflation went to 150%. It was a tremendous downturn. There were tremendous droughts. The year I left, the economy came back, the crops came up. So my leaving really made an enormous contribution.
And also, I think when you left, and years later when you wrote the book, you have described the country that you left behind. Not left behind because you're always there and you are doing a lot of stuff for Romania. You are describing as such. In the 20 years since the fall of communism, Romania has moved from the bottom of the pack of former Soviet satellites in Eastern Europe, in both an economic and a political sense, to the front row of New Europe. In the 5 years from 2004 to 2008, its growth rate averaged 6% annually, the highest in Europe. Romania is a vibrant democracy, and because of its size, a significant member of NATO and the EU. After a 42-year detour into the Soviet orbit, this country of warm, smart, and creative people has returned to Europe. I mean, it's a very touching assessment, and probably this is one reason why you haven't. You have still been involved in a lot of Romanian projects ever since. So after you came back to the States, Romania was still one of your focuses. And also now, and as a chairman of Alianța, of course you channel this energy, you channel your connections, your charisma to the advancement of Romanian interest and the strengthening of the transatlantic relationship. People ask themselves, well, what is this Alianța? What is? Can you talk a little bit about this? Is it a foundation? Is it a lobby group? Is it an association?
Yes.
What it is and what is it doing? Because of course, I know it does a lot of great stuff. But maybe
sure.
It's useful to remind.
More than happy to. So, Alianța was really the brainchild of one of my successors, former Ambassador Mark Gittenstein, and several others who recognized that the community of Americans, those of Romanian heritage, but also people like me, not of Romanian heritage, who have an interest in Romania, whether they be professionals or business people, or Peace Corps volunteers, or formal Fulbrighters, or whatever it might be, who have experience in Romania and love Romania, weren't organized at a national level. And so the public voice for a strong Romanian-American relationship really wasn't there. And we can analogize really quickly to the French-American relationship, the Italian-American relationship, the Greek-American relationship, the Czech-American relationship. Basically, they were organized in the United States to strengthen, and so Ambassador Gittensteen, several people said, we need to organize ourselves. And he asked me to join him in that process. And that's when we set up Alianța, to provide a vehicle for people to work together on common projects that involve Romania and the United States. And we've done that. We're now in our 7th year. We have supporters from across the United States. We have an annual gala and summit in Washington, D.C., generally in the fall, where we honor prominent people, Americans, Romanians who have made a major contribution to the Romanian-American relationship. And an example of someone 3 years ago was former President George W. Bush, who had a big role in Romania becoming a member of NATO. On the other hand, this last year we honored Anastasia Soare, the very successful Romanian-American beauty entrepreneur. So all kinds of people contribute to the relationship. We try to celebrate that. We bring people together to find out how we can work together. And we take on projects that will help strengthen the relationship.
How can people be involved in the effort of Alianța to promote the strengthening of the transatlantic relationship?
It's very easy. It's open enrollment. People can go to our website and just sign up and say, I want to learn about what you're doing. I want to get involved in it. We also set up last year a Romanian Friends of Alianța in Romania, because we had quite a number of Romanians who were interested in the United States and also Americans in Romania who wanted to be involved in this. So now we have a group that has a regular series of activities in Bucharest. For now, maybe hopefully we'll go elsewhere in the country. One thing that we're doing right now, one of the campaigns we've launched, is around the U.S. Census. So the U.S. Census will be in March of this year. It happens every 10 years. And there's a question on it, question number 9, asks your heritage. And so you can fill in, I'll fill in that I'm Italian American. We want those of Romanian heritage to fill in on their census form their Romanian heritage. Why is that important? It's important because you don't count if you aren't counted. We need to show at the national level how many Romanian Americans there are across the country, but then at the community level, in New York, in Long Island, in Detroit, in LA. It's very important in terms of the visibility of the relationship, which can be informal, which can relate to community activities, cultural activities, but can also relate to the security relationship. I mean, there are strong relations between the United States, an alliance between the United States and Romania. But you got to keep nurturing that. You got to keep people at the highest levels in the United States government understanding that there are a lot of Americans who care about a strong relationship between the United States and Romania.
It's a very worthwhile effort, I should say.
And the website is www.alianza.org.
And the website is www.alianza.org.
We can't do without it.
Absolutely.
It's a bit before I open the floor, because I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the audience. I just want to announce that I don't know about the others, but probably there will be many others. We haven't gotten involved in Alianța's activities, and we are very, very proud at the Romanian Cultural Institute to announce that we have closed a partnership, created a partnership with Alianța. We will be organizing several events related to 140 years since the establishment of diplomatic relations, but not only to that. We will be taking care of the artistic, cultural side of the gala in September and many other things. We are very, very happy and proud that we can in this way contribute to your efforts that have been many and really, really significant.
Well, we appreciate the partnership as well, and we'll be announcing probably in the coming weeks a number of activities over the course of the year. It works both ways because so many Americans, particularly those not of Romanian heritage, miss so much about their cultural experience in Romania. So the opportunity with the Cultural Institute to bring Romanian culture to those of us who are living in the United States is a huge benefit for us.
Yeah. And on that note, the floor is open, so any questions, any curiosities, anything. Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Ambassador.
How are you?
My name is Greg Julian. We know each other.
We do.
As I remember, you set up a record as ambassador. Very few people knows you are the only U.S. ambassador to Romania who crossed the Queensboro Bridge to meet the Romanian community, the regular people,
Absolutely.
taking questions, answering questions. Tell us about this experience, if you remember it, as you remember it. And my question is, why there is no U.S. ambassador before or after you left office who did that?
Well, I appreciate very much the question and the comments. What you're referring to is when I was ambassador, when I came back to the United States, I traveled around the United States, including across the Queensboro Bridge, to meet with Americans interested in Romania. Many of them Romanian Americans, but not all Romanian Americans, not just Romanian Americans. And so it was a tremendous opportunity to learn how people who know more about Americans who know more about Romania than the average American, how they look at what they're concerned about. And one of the issues that frankly I learned about during that process of being ambassador was visas. And that's why one of the reasons today that Alianza has taken on also as a project over the long run is to get visa waiver for Romania. Romania is one of only 3 countries in the European Union that doesn't have visa waiver in the United States. And I learned about that from visiting Romanian Americans in the United States who wanted folks to be able to visit. And so, you know, we talk about military alliances and we talk about investment, we talk about trade, but families are the core of any society. And so I learned that, and it was very, very valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yep. Over there.
We're hearing a lot about Putin and the breakup of Europe, and the rise of nationalism in Europe.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if this is going on as well in Romania, and also how is Romanian reacting to the crisis in the Donbass, the Russian threat?
I'm not as expert on Romania as I used to be, so I mean, I live in the United States. So this is my perspective from having been there and trying to keep in touch. I'd say 2 things. One is the conflict, an ethnic conflict, a national conflict, 20 years ago when I was there, is very different today. Not necessarily better, not necessarily worse, but different. I was there right after 250,000 people died in the former Yugoslavia, and during the years when the lead up to the war in Kosovo and the fear of ethnic cleansing in Kosovo. And at that time, the neighborhood for Romania was dangerous in these terms. Now today, frankly, it's much better. I mean, frankly, dictatorship is gone in Serbia. The dangers that we all were aware of are reduced. On the other hand, when I was ambassador, it was when we became ambassador, Yeltsin was still the president in Russia, and the United States had a, what's the word I'm looking for? I would say a constructive relationship And the United States government was of the view that Russia could, in the medium term, become a democratic country, that Russia could become a constructive partner with NATO and with the European Union and with the United States. That's obviously, it's not gone in that direction, and that's not where we are today. I'll never forget my Romanian friends, particularly the former, he was then the foreign minister, Andrei Pleșu, the great writer and intellectual who was the foreign minister for two of my 3 years there, who would constantly sort of jibe me in a very good-natured way about how it seemed like Americans trusted the Russians too much. And I'll never forget the war in Kosovo ended on June 8th of 1999. And immediately the Russians sent some of their troops into Pristina, to the Pristina airport. They kept boots on the ground. And the Russians wanted to reinforce them by flying in reinforcements. And so Foreign Minister Pleșu called me up one Saturday, like right after the end of the war, and he said, we have a request from the Russian embassy for permission for Russian overfly rights from Russia to Pristina airport. And we thought we should check in with our American friends and see what you thought about that. And I said, I think I'll want to check, obviously, with folks in Washington, but my guess is we're not going to be real thrilled about that. And he said, you doubt the Russians' intentions. I said, Andre, yeah, I do. Anyway, my point is that he was right, Romanians were right, we underestimated what was going to happen in Russia. And I still personally am of the view, I do not hold the view that, and I have spent a good bit of time in Russia, not as much as Romania, obviously. I do hold the view that Russia is not destined to always be the autocratic petrostate that really is what it is right now. That I think Russia can become a constructive player. I think they can become democratic. You can't see it on the horizon at all, and we got to be very strong. But I think Romanians had a much more accurate view of what was going to happen in Russia than some other folks did. Sorry for the long answer.
I don't think I need a mic. I'm pretty good in the classroom, so I'm very happy to see Ambassador Rosapepe opening this conference after he opened the 2004 conference at the University of Bucharest with a great talk. And I would like to ask you, because obviously everyone doubted your intentions. Former Minister Pleșu thought you were too close to Russians.
I don't think he would have put it exactly that way.
No, then people saw you too close to Romanian. On the other hand, you were recognized for being the ambassador who really opened, who had a great consular outreach, and for whom, during the term of whose Romanians felt more welcome. Things got easier, so you were the one, I'm quoting the press now, the one who rattled the cage. What can you tell us about that?
I'm not quite following the question,
what can you tell us about...
Oh, we're talking about visas,
Not visas, no, not about the visas, but the way in which the consular service at the American Embassy was changed during your term.
I've never thought about it exactly that way. I mean, I did care a lot about, here's the way I thought about consular service. And I didn't know much about it until I became ambassador. It's like, no part of the US government has more contact with more Romanians than the consular office of the embassy. And so, if we want to win friends and influence people, we want good customer service, we want people to feel like they're welcome. We can't always give people the answer that they want. but we need to be very respectful. And I think, I think that's the way our consular officers intend to be. I think that's the way the consulate wants to be. I think perhaps by my talking about things publicly, as I did, it drew more attention to that. I mean, frankly, I have no idea, frankly, how the consular office is working these days in Bucharest. But I do think from a U.S. government point of view, because I was ambassador before 9/11, the overall thrust of American policy towards people visiting the United States was, I think, more welcoming. I think we went through a period after 9/11, understandably, of overreacting. And I think that, and in fact, I heard similar kinds of things related to recently involving Iranian Americans having problems because of the tensions with Iran. I mean, it's very important that all governments understand that the people of our countries are going to be here for a long time. And whatever the political issue of the moment is, or even the security issue of the moment, we got to keep people safe. That's the first responsibility. We have to be conscious of doing it in a way that we're making more friends instead of more enemies. Other questions?
Microphone?
Yeah. Ambassador, I also had the pleasure to meet you 20 years ago in Bucharest, also at the opening of another conference. My name is Adrian. And I'd like to thank you, first of all, for the courage of speaking in Romanian about some things 20 years ago that Romanians were not prepared to speak about. At the time, I was leading a lesbian and gay organization, and we organized the European Conference of Lesbian and Gay Groups.
Oh yeah.
And you agreed kindly to give the opening speech at that conference in a context in which no Romanian politician or public official of those that we approached agreed to do that. So I'd like to thank you for the very big deal that was in a context, again, in which we have the criminal law and no Romanian leader would facilitate the voice of the community at the time. I'd like to ask you how you perceive the changes in that sense of us accepting differences and social issues in Romania. I think you already referred to ethnic issues. Thank you.
I frankly am not knowledgeable enough about those issues as they exist today in Romania to really contribute anything to the conversation. I'm not there. I mean, my impression is that things have gotten better, but I don't really know the details. I wouldn't want to, demonstrate my ignorance. But thank you very much for speaking on it. Thank you for what you all have been doing. This falls in the category of how lucky I was and how easy it is to be the U.S. ambassador. I'm serious. I mean, a good example, something like that, is for Romanian politicians, it was hard. For me, it was easy. Nothing on them. It was just easy.
I know the future of Alliance.
Okay, so earlier you mentioned that Romania was one of the 3 countries in the EU that doesn't have a visa waiver to the US.
Yep.
And so my question is, out of curiosity, why do you think that is?
The reason is, I would say, 2 or 3-fold. One is purely technical. Is the way we decide visa waiver has gone through various bureaucratic rules over the years, and it's never come out quite right for Romania. So that's it's almost like bad luck. I mean, it's not like anybody is like saying, "Oh no, let's keep out the Romanians." It's not like that at all. But it's a rule-based system, which is good in some ways, but sometimes the rules don't kind of follow common sense. That's one thing. Pardon me. Secondly, and this does go to the Allianz question, is There used to be 4 countries in the EU that did the visa waiver. The 4th was Poland, and they just got it last year. They got it last year because Americans of Polish heritage and Americans interested in Poland lobbied real hard to get it changed, and it happened. So I put this in the category of we just got to work at it. We will win. It will happen. In 2013, Ambassador Gittenstein and I worked together right at the beginning of Allianz. We worked together to get language in the U.S. Senate's version of the immigration reform bill that would have led to Romania and Poland at that time getting into visa waiver. The bill passed with 70 votes out of 100 in the Senate, if I recall correctly. And then the bill just didn't pass the House. So nothing happened on the legislative front, but there have been bills introduced. My view is that after this election, regardless of what the results are, there will be some major changes in immigration laws of some kind. And I think that may be an opportunity to take this issue on, because there are a lot of difficult immigration issues in the world. You know, letting Romanian grandmothers visit the newborns of their children in the United States is not that hard.
And let's take the last one.
I'm going to ask you 2 questions. One's easy though. I read your book when it first came out, and I'll just tell everyone, as a Romanian American, I found it very enjoyable, very interesting, and you obviously have your sense of humor when you travel, but I would recommend the book to anybody who is interested in Romania. My first question is, you travel a lot to places a lot of Americans don't go to. What's your favorite place in Romania to travel to visit? And the other question is more about, how have you seen over the years Romania tackle the corruption issue in terms of businesses being open to coming to Romania?
Okay, two different questions. On the second one, I think people here who know a lot about Romania know that the past, I'm going to say 10 years, there's been huge action, controversy, reaction around corruption in Romania. I personally think that a lot of progress has been made. Again, I'm not there, so I'm not as knowledgeable about it as other people are. I felt when I was there that a lot of, there were two kinds of corruption in Romania. We talk about this in the book. There was sort of the big corruption and the little corruption. And the big corruption was almost predictable based on a state economy and people trying to take advantage of state assets, all the stuff that we all know about. And that would go down over time as the economy privatized, as new investment came in. A good example is, and I'm sure there's corruption in New York City, so it's not like all Romanian. But the fact that new industries like the IT industry have such a big share of the Romanian economy is good in itself in terms of transforming the business culture. A little corruption, which relates to ordinary people's experience with hospitals, with public services. That, we talk about this in the book, is one of my impressions was, and I'm Italian, so it resonates, is, and in fact I visited on this trip that my wife and I took to Romania last June, we also visited my cousins in southern Italy. And talking with my cousins in southern Italy is like talking to Romanians about corruption. And one of the points we make in the book is that you can have a lot of problems in your country, and corruption is clearly above average in Romania compared to some other places. There's no question about it. On the other hand, you can have dynamic economic growth. Literally, in the 20 years since I was there, the ratio of individual income of Romanians to the EU average has doubled. And so you can make a lot of progress with a lot of problems. And so I think it's terrific that there's so many efforts being made to reduce corruption, both the big corruption and the little corruption. But I think when you put it in context, the reality is you can make a lot of progress even while you have problems. And your first question was,
What's your favorite place?
Oh yeah, I don't want to go there. There are by far too many. There are too many. No, that's actually one of the things I found very interesting, just from a personal intellectual point of view, is the diversity of culture in Romania, which obviously comes from the history and the Austrians and the Turks and the Germans and the Hungarians and all those things. So there's just lots of, just incredible, lots of interesting places from all kinds of different directions.
How about the place that surprised you the most in Romania? Let's say, let's.
The place that surprised me the most. I actually think coming into the airport the first time.
We started on this note. But I think a lot of the topics that we haven't had the time to cover are very well covered in the book in a funny way, in an interesting way. A lot of portraits of politicians, of places. The title is Dracula is Dead, which is a wrong title because you haven't met me after 12 o'clock. With this said, the book is available over there, and the ambassador has accepted to sign it. We'll be happy to sign it. But before that, please join me in thanking Ambassador Rosapepe for this.